Russ Dickerson is here now too.
And Nancy as well.
Yes. So Barbara, I didn't know if you wanted to add to the agenda that we had this discussion about increasing the time for the meetings. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Nancy, if you're going to discuss increasing the time, I would suggest we look at utilizing the time more efficiently, because we've already wasted 12, 13 minutes of this meeting time for nothing, and it's a routine anymore. I would personally not extend the time.
Okay, well, I'm just bringing it up because it was part of a conversation. And I thought we had come to that agreement, but anyway, if it's on the table, it should be on the agenda.
What? I don't.
And I agree. I mean, I think that, the meeting should start at 6 o'clock.
Is anybody talking? Can anybody hear anyone?
Yeah. I can. Down. Get down.
So I think we should open the meeting and get going.
Yeah, let's get going.
So you guys can hear me, but I can't hear you. This is weird.
You can't, Barbara, you can't hear me?
Ah, okay. I just had to touch this computer is horrible. Okay, gotcha. Okay, working now. Great. Okay, and everybody's here. Terrific.
No, everybody's not here. But
Well, a lot of people are here. Let's see. Participants.
We have a quorum.
Six.
I think we have a quorum.
Six.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So 6 out of 8. Much more than. Cool. Okay, and so just to start out that at the last meeting, we had said because of sort of the changing focus or changing way it seems that the SWAC has got to be functioning if we want to be at all useful. My skill set doesn't work real well for being the chair of it. And we do way better with somebody who's has expertise in leading nonprofits and organizing and doing this sort of stuff exactly in Nancy Meyer's bailiwick. So she has kindly agreed to be volunteered to be chair. And I went to Marion Brewer and asked if they can do the trade to make Nancy the chair and consider making me a vice chair, which is a position that they're supposed to have had according to the legislative mandate, but have never filled. And she just reported 10 minutes ago that she's requesting this and is temporarily for this meeting doing that change at least. So you're on, Nancy.
Oh, I'm on?
You got it. Now, did you see the thing from Miriam that you are a temporary chair today?
No, I didn't see that. I
Okay.
was out picking up my car, which I sent a note. Okay.
Okay, yeah,
All right.
I responded to that and yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I wasn't kind of unprepared for that, but okay. So then I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Barbara. We'll officially take a motion to open the meeting. Somebody make a
Right.
motion to open the meeting.
I don't think, do we need a motion for that?
Yes,
No.
technically,
Second.
yes, you're supposed to.
Really? Interesting. See, you know so much more about running meetings, just proves the point.
Oh, yeah, boy, it's very exciting.
Nancy, I never heard of having a motion to open a meeting.
Yeah, that's usually how we do it, but
Well, it might be how you do it, but I don't think that's under Robert's Rules of Order or any procedures that I've ever heard
Who
of.
cares?
well.
Okay, well, why don't we open
All
it?
the
and get going?
organizations I've worked with, we officially open and
just
close the
declares the
meeting.
meeting open.
So, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and say the meeting's open. I think down the road, it would be helpful to have a timekeeper. That's an informal, kind of just helpful thing to have, but I also would like to, I'd like to amend the agenda or add under role of the SWAC a discussion about, because there's been some subsequent discussion about time frame for the meetings. So we'll add that in there. In the future, what I'd like to do is have people contribute ideas prior to the meeting, and I'll send something out about that to send your ideas for what you'd like to see happen. And we'll put an agenda together in advance and have people look at it. So anyway, so we have limited time tonight, and we have very helpful guest who's here. The focus of the meeting really is going to be on the landfill methane emission issues that have come up in some of our conversations. And Russ Dickerson is with us tonight. Russ, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, and I do think it would be helpful to give a little background about what your role is, and also a little bit of information. I did reread the notes that had been provided to us, but then some background on the situation with the pipe, and Dave's been involved in this. So Dave, please jump in if it makes sense. So Russ, take it away.
You all remember that Russ was here at an earlier meeting presenting to us.
Yes, I've been there at other meetings. So yeah, my name is Russ Dickerson. I'm a professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Science at the University of Maryland. And hi, Kevin. How are you? Kevin was kind enough to invite us not too long ago to do a tour of the landfill. I'll give you a 2-minute background. We have a project supported by NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, to try to improve our understanding of greenhouse gas emissions from the Baltimore, Washington area. And so with that support, we have instruments that can measure, among other things, methane. And we flew those instruments around on a small research airplane and made a number of discoveries, one of which was the Baltimore, Washington area emits 2 or 3 times more methane than EPA or MDE or anybody else estimated. That you shouldn't feel too bad about that, because the same is true for Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Providence, and pretty much all the old East Coast cities. The other thing we discovered was that there's 2 or 3 times more methane coming out of Brown Station than was reported. So before Kevin makes a grumpy face, I will say that MDE did the mea culpa on that. They said it was, in fact, they misplaced a number in their calculations, and when they recalculated it, they got something really quite similar to what we were measuring. So landfills are a substantial source of methane, but they are also a substantial source of potential energy, in that there's enough landfill gas produced at Brown Station to basically power the city of Cheverly. That's not currently being used to generate electricity, but it has in the past, and I'm told it will again soon in the future. So we being the university, NIST, NOAA, the Weather Bureau, and the Maryland Department of the Environment, put together a proposal to go and take a look at Brown Station, because it's a big, well-managed landfill, and use this as a test bed, because there are a number of ways the methane emissions can be reduced. I don't need to go into the engineering right now, but the methane can be used or it can be consumed before it gets into the atmosphere. There are things we can do that will help Maryland reach its greenhouse gas reduction goals and also, protect the atmospheric environment in that general area. So we had a visit, and as usual, people want to be careful that they're not punished for doing a good deed. And we've gone back and forth a little bit with the county on non-disclosure agreements. Turns out federal agencies cannot sign those because they take the taxpayers' money to make measurements. Those measurements go into the public domain. But NIST did come up with a research agreement, like a contract, that seems to be acceptable to the administration at Brown Station, and they told me that it looks okay. They're modifying that now, and this should be acceptable to the federal agencies. MDE doesn't much matter because the county has to report to them anyway. They're forbidden to keep any secrets from the Maryland Department of the Environment. But then once that's done, then we're hoping we can go forward with a variety of measurement methods to find out exactly how much methane's emitted and what we could do about it using some different techniques. So that's the state of the science right now. Oh, I mentioned Kevin's name too much. He ran away.
I'm here. Listening.
So yeah, thank you for being helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a couple of questions.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. You have in the past done these flyovers. If you begin doing some of these measurements, are they going to also be flyovers again, as well as on the ground measurements? Can you explain a little bit how you're doing that?
Sure. We will continue to fly the airplane. We also have a mobile lab in a Chevy Suburban that's run by NOAA. I refer to this as NOAA's Air Resources Car, or Noah's Ark, and they can make measurements from the ground. We don't have permission yet to actually make measurements on site, but they can get close enough that it's easy to detect the plume from a big landfill. What we would like to do is there are half a dozen different ways to figure out how much methane is coming from a landfill and where it's coming from. And there are a number of engineering techniques that can substantially reduce these emissions. So it depends on the soil you put on top, for example, and how much methane you pump out and burn. I am not a landfill engineer, but we have one in the group. So there are techniques. You can put a tower up and measure vertical wind speed and changes in the methane concentration. That's called eddy covariance. That'll give you a footprint of a few hundred meters across. There are remote sensing techniques that you can do from the ground, from the airplane, from satellites. There are chamber techniques. You can envision an aquarium that you turn upside down and stick into the ground and then measure how much methane comes out. And they each have advantages and disadvantages. But the idea is if we put several there at the same time, if we can get them to give the same answer, then we have some better confidence in what's right. And our engineering colleagues say that if you have the appropriate amount, I think it's about a yard deep, of high quality soil on top of the landfill, then anything that would otherwise leak into the atmosphere will be to some substantial extent consumed by the microbes in the soil and enter the atmosphere as CO2 instead of methane. That's a greenhouse gas too, but it's only a fraction as potent as methane. So that's a win. So that may be more detailed than you want, but that's our plan. We have colleagues at the EPA who have techniques that can look over a long horizontal path and measure how much methane there is. And they're eager to find a friendly site where we can make all of these measurements. And then with anything like luck, implement some management practices that are not too expensive, but can make a big improvement. I
Russ,
see. Go ahead.
yeah, I want to ask, this is more of a comment. We've been looking for a site in the north part of the county to do a composting facility that would be used by several local towns in the kind of the College Park area. And we talked to people at the USDA about a site that they were actually planning to do some experimenting, figuring out, I guess, best practices for covering a landfill. And maybe you're totally aware of that, but I just want to mention that USDA right now.
I didn't know that
guess,
USDA was working on best practices for landfill.
You
I'll
did,
find out who it is,
Oh.
or if you can email me, that would be good.
sure. Okay, thank you.
Barbara?
Question. I know that early on, when Lee Flick was still part of DOE, and we discussed this way back, he was quite wedded to the idea that the excess methane was from abutting wetlands and or abutting rubble fill, and not from Brown Station. Is there any chance that you can, in your flyovers, dryovers, whatever, monitor the slightly larger area to see how Brown Station relates, how it's, what it releases relates to the surrounding wetlands, rubble fills, etc.?
Sure. It is true that wetlands emit methane. And there is a nearby rubble fill that also generates some methane. But we're pretty certain now, we've done a lot of flyovers summer and winter, and wetlands don't make too much methane in the winter. The ground's too cold for the bacteria, the methanogenic bacteria, to do their thing. So there isn't much doubt remaining. And to be fair, it was an arithmetic mistake, basically, that has been since fixed. And now the official inventories agree with what we've been measuring for the past few years.
If it's possible to still do a buzz over the larger area, just to quiet any fears that remaining people may have in MDE or elsewhere, it could help in the public acceptance.
Emissions.
Sure, we have done some additional flybys.
Super.
Last winter, I think, January. I have to, we're still processing the data from January, but I'm pretty sure we picked up Brown Station a couple of times. We'll have a look. And we continue to fly over the summer as well. That's the main goal is to study photochemical smog. We had a smog episode last week already. But we measure methane at the same time. So, right, if that would help, I will try to generate some pictures.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking that would.
Okay.
Chuck, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. As some of you may recall or know, there was a hearing just this past week concerning extending the life of Brown Station Road for another almost 100 years, if you look at the extensions that they're talking about, and using infill areas. One of the primary concerns that came out from many of the residents who testified was the odor coming off of the landfill. And once again, county officials tried to point the fingers at the surrounding fills as, quote, some of the cause. Now, I'm not saying it's not, but those of us who live here, including people who immediately abut the landfill, still are of the opinion it's coming off the landfill. One of the other things that came out, and I know it's been a concern of the residents for a while, we've heard that the grass was being pumped off and being sent Upper Marlboro to the correction facility. Well, that isn't the case. And we finally got a county official or a state official or somebody, I don't know who he was. Kevin, you may remember his name, but he admitted on the record that that pipeline isn't functioning. It's been shut down for a while and they're flaming off the gases. And the odor, the neighbors complained extensively about the odor. So it's still a major, major issue. So if there's a study done, I would hope that it would expand beyond just the landfill to put that issue to rest, that it's not substantially coming off of other fills. It is coming off of Brown Station Road, because the county keeps pointing the finger at everybody else and isn't dealing, in the citizens' opinion, with the issue of the odor. Thank you.
Russ, can
Russ-
you do anything about odor measuring?
Odor is notoriously subjective. We can measure things like hydrogen sulfide, rotten egg stink, that can be produced if you put drywall in a landfill. Drywall is gypsum, that's calcium sulfate, and that doesn't belong in a landfill, because when it goes anaerobic, that sulfate turns into sulfide, and that really stinks. I was there. I was only there once, but for a few hours on a nice day, and I didn't notice any rotten egg stink. To say, to measure the odor, it can be done, but it's not something that we do. I need a specific molecule we're looking for. So
Doesn't methane have an odor?
no. The natural gas you might have in your stove, or your furnace, the gas company adds stinky gas to that, so that for your own safety, so that if you have a leak, you don't blow up your house. But methane by itself is pretty much odorless. It's also not toxic. It will explode if you get up into percents. So that's a worry.
Yeah, a year and a half ago, Kevin organized a lovely tour for us newbies on the SWAC. And we spent, several hours standing on top of the landfill and walking around there. And again, it was a nice day, but standing directly on top, it smelled sort of like the earth and the outside and the woods.
So when we were there, I have pictures of the generators. So they have the capacity to generate electricity, but I was told that it's been under maintenance for about 3 years. And Kevin, that's not my responsibility, but Kevin might be able to give you more information on when they're flaring it. I have pictures of the flares. The flaring looks pretty clean. It's not you can see that it's hot, but there's no visible soot or anything coming out of these flares. It's a sad thing, because that's a valuable resource that it would be nice to use. But they have to complete their maintenance, and that's something I cannot answer.
We've been haranguing them now for 2 years on that. And the last I've heard is 2024, and they can't patch the pipe, and they have to replace the pipe. And I don't understand, if you can put a man on the moon in shorter time than that, why laying a couple of miles of pipe takes 5 years or however long this has been out. But we keep trying to urge MDE that both it's a waste of energy, and it just looks really bad for an organization that wants to show itself off as caring for the environment.
So Russ, I wanted to ask you, have they at all consulted, or how does the new expanded Area C going to play into, measuring and keeping track of and so forth with, significant, increase in the landfill volume?
The volume would increase substantially. There's a big valley between, as I remember, areas A and B.
Yeah, very large.
That's already covered with soil. Apparently you leave the soil on and they just fill it in with more waste and then put more soil on top. Again, if it's managed well, then the bulk of that methane can be stripped off and used to generate electricity, and a relatively small amount get into the atmosphere. But the actual engineering is somebody else's job. So, I mean, we have somebody from the University of Illinois who's written papers on how to do that. And they've had a lot of success in
Mm.
California. And my understanding is it's for example, when the landfill is active, you pile up the waste and it's on a slope and you keep piling it up until that area is filled. Then you put, well, at the end of the day, they put a certain amount of soil on top just to kind of hold it down. But then I think that comes off again the next day. And exactly how steep that is and how it's managed can have a substantial impact on the emissions while the landfill is being filled. And there's another set of criteria for after it's full. But again, this is something that Kevin's probably better able to answer than I am.
Kevin had
Yeah, so-
said that there was a person who.
Yes,
could
I
come
don't
to
know,
it.
Chuck or Kevin. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, so for the Area C infill project, it assures a continuous supply of electricity to the Department of Corrections. In terms of the pipeline project, the design is 95% complete and construction will commence in fiscal year 2024. So the construction will happen in FY24.
Okay,
And
that's-
you're referring to that being the pipeline to the corrections facility?
That's correct. Yes, the pipeline replacement project.
Okay, now
Okay.
I'm a little confused. So, well, first of all, is this Maryland fiscal year that starts in June, July, or federal?
July 1,
fiscal-
I think.
July,
1, okay.
that's correct. Yes, and it will be completed within 6 months. The pipeline project.
Oh, okay. So that's by the end of this calendar year, more or less.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm a little confused. Are you going to pipe that gas to the correctional facility where it'll generate heat? And what about the big diesel generators that you have sitting there?
So at present they're being repaired. They're being rehabilitated.
Right.
So in time for when the pipeline design when the pipeline is completed, then yeah, the generators will be used.
Oh, you'll do both.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
provide heat to the correctional facilities
Mm-hmm.
and electricity to whoever.
Our garage section of the landfill.
Kevin, correct me if I'm incorrect. The area where that pumping station is ultimately going to be one of the areas that's filled. Is that correct? That's in one of the valleys. It's going to be filled in eventually. Is that correct?
Yes. Uh-huh.
What's the time frame for that particular area to be filled? And I know there was some discussion eventually all of those operations would be, quote, moved across the street. Do you know any timing for the pumping facility? Will that be moved across the street? And if so, when?
It will not happen in the short term. I think if I recall correctly, it will happen after 10 years. Because the relocation will occur gradually as the Area C starts to operate. Then yeah, the plan is to have the relocation happen in the short and longer term, but it's not gonna happen right away.
So Kevin, has there been a plan for the construction of when is Area C supposed to be open?
The target is by January 2025.
Nancy,
25 fiscal
Nancy,
year, the beginning of fiscal year 25?
Yes. So
Nancy, if I'm not wrong, the testimony at the hearing was that the landfill would fill up next year, and I assume next calendar year,
Next calendar.
2024, not the fiscal year. Is that correct, Kevin?
yes, it's in the calendar year.
So the
19.
current fill area next year would reach capacity, and that's what they're shooting for, to get Area C permitted before they reach capacity on the existing fill areas.
Mhm. So waste placement at area C will start January 2024.
Okay, and I presume because of the way the gas capture works, there's some process of engineering that has to be put in place in advance to some extent. Is that a process underway or has already been done?
Not yet, but yeah, but it's going to be done at the same time as the area C construction will happen. Are you referring to the gas collection system?
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, it's part of the plan.
and that will intersect with the current repairs to the pipeline somehow? So that, is the plan for the methane from area C to go to the same places for use or something else?
No, it will be directed to the same pipeline, yes.
Is there sufficient capacity in the correctional facility and these generators to use all the additional gas that will be produced by area C, since area B, even though if it's closed down, will still be producing some level of methane, I assume? So is there sufficient capacity, or is there going to have to be found another market for this additional gas that'll now be generated from area C?
Well, some will be sold to Washington Gas, and then some will also be used for the landfill,
Okay.
the garage section and other facilities there.
Okay, so there won't be any need to flare anything. There'll be sufficient markets to consume all gas that's being produced.
Right, but there will be some residual gas that will still be flared. It's not 100%, no flaring at all, because there are some residual gases that will have to be flared. But that's very insignificant compared to when we use the methane for electricity and heat.
Okay.
So there will be
Barbara?
minimal flaring.
Barbara, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Back when the pipeline was working to the correction facility, what fraction of the methane was going there that was produced versus what fraction was just being released or flared or whatever?
So it's around 90%, 90 to 95%. So majority is used at the DOC, and only 5% is used at the landfill. So the DOC benefits significantly from the methane that's coming from the landfill. It's about 95%, 90 to 95%.
Because I thought Russ just said that there was enough methane to power the town of Cheverly. And I'm surprised that the correctional facility is as large as Cheverly.
I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard any plan of putting that in place, but for sure there will be a distribution of the supply to benefit the county. But the priority is really to supply electricity to the Department of Corrections.
When we are going to be getting this presentation from the person who you said at the landfill, who could fill us in on this piping and methane and whatnot, can we get some numbers also of the amounts from them?
Sure, yeah, yes, sure.
So
Great.
Kevin, is there somebody on staff who, or we're working with, that could provide more detail of the actual operations and engineering?
Yeah.
Who would that be?
If you want, I can invite the technical person in charge of the gas. It could be one of our engineers. Yeah,
Okay,
one of our engineers will have the, will be able to share detailed information about the landfill gas.
okay, so we'll arrange that. Dave?
Mhm.
Yeah, I've got a question about the collection system. Who is it that actually measures that collection system? You know, how effective it is, if it's performing to its standard? Is it someone that's with DOE or a contractor?
Dave, could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, the collection system right now that's in areas A and B, that's where you're pulling your methane from. And obviously, I think there's somebody who takes care of that process, but also I assume must be measuring to make sure that that is working as planned or designed.
So SCS engineers, one of our contractors, is in charge of monitoring our collection system, including the flaring system. So they have a person there manning the facility 24/7.
And would you consider them like a third party? I'm just wondering if, is it best to be having someone measure it who's, should be an independent party? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out as a,
So SCS engineer is an engineering and consulting firm. They provide service to the county in terms of the technical aspect of landfill. But they monitor the landfill based on the standards set by MDE. So it's they have a template that they follow in terms of monitoring or getting the numbers. So it's all based on standards set by MDE.
Kevin, is their
Kevin, is
contract,
that something,
is the contract with the state or with the county for them to run that operation?
Contract with the county.
So it is a county contracted operation, so the county indirectly can control it.
That's correct, yes. So MDE, the role
Fox
of
minding
MDE.
the chicken mining the fox mining the chicken coop, right?
My understanding, this is Jonathan, my understanding is MDE really control everything. MDE, they are the monopoly of controlling everything. That is my understanding. And nothing go through without the MDE. And I may be wrong, but that is my understanding. Thank you.
So MDE ensures that regulations are followed, complied with by counties, local governments. They provide oversight. The county submits reports to them. So we work with them regularly, and we have reports that we submit to them.
so Kevin, is there some kind of, at the end of the year, like we had discussed, is there some kind of reporting that the county puts together that it submits to the state?
Yes. So, for example, tonnages at the landfill, we submit reports to MDE. Same also for our organic compost facility and the material recovery facility. We submit report to MDE annually.
So I don't know if commission members there's been discussion about seeing some of these reports. I don't know if that's a possibility, but that might be helpful for people to see what's being reported.
Kevin, are they online? Are those reports made available online as a public matter, or are they just between you and the state?
So what MDE does is to come up with, for example, recycling tonnages. They come up with an annual report which is published online. I can provide the link. So, for example, for fiscal year 2020-21, the county claimed the top spot as the #1 county in the state of Maryland with the highest recycling rate. So the reports are translated into into major reports that MDE publishes online.
But that's not exactly the same thing as a kind of reporting that happens around specific operations. Is that
Yeah.
right? Is that the methane, there's reporting for methane that's not necessarily in a detailed report in what the county releases to the public.
That's correct. So usually MDE come up with aggregated reports, right? Doesn't particularly point to a
So
specific
when you
topic.
say they're aggregated across the state.
Yeah, yeah,
So
know.
therein lies the problem, Nancy. The details get lost. It's
So
too
they-
large a report to cover just Prince George's.
So they come up with summary reports.
So that's why there's been several commission members who've asked me or in other conversations have raised the issue about whether some of these operations planning or, the reporting about activity at the end of the year would be available to commission members. So
Mhm.
Kevin, that's a question for you and the DOE staff.
Yeah, in fact, I just uploaded our project deliverables on the shared file. You can see all of our projects there and the status. So we will update it regularly for your consumption. It's project deliverable matrix that you can refer to when you want to know the status of the project. It's on our shared
But
file.
but there's no specific operations information, for example, on methane in that project thing. It's just a table that outlines about 5 different projects very generally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will ask Marilyn regarding the annual reports that we submit to MD, if you can take a look at those reports.
Okay.
But they're open documents. I'm sure you can go over those documents.
So I presume there's planning documents and there's also reporting documents, and then there's also an annual audit of the department.
Yes. It's done by the Office of Budget and Management.
Mhm.
And Nancy, I talked to Marlene about it, and so she's in discussion with Andrea for somebody from the budget office to serve as resource person. Hopefully next month to discuss the budget process and the planning process as well, because they go together, right?
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
so we'll do our best to have that person invited, so the group can be enlightened on how RRD or DOE in general does planning for its programs and services,
Okay.
including the auditing process.
Kevin,
Okay.
I have one more question.
Great,
It's sort of
thank you.
in the same area here. I'm assuming there's been calculations done because of the size of A and B, and to estimate what one would think the amount of methane that's being generated. And I would assume each year there's probably some number that is estimated as to how much is actually being captured. Would there be numbers, those two numbers that we could see, both what is the estimate and also what is actually collected or what might be escaping into the atmosphere?
Kevin, that would be a question for you, I think.
Yeah, let me check with our landfill manager, David, for those numbers that you're requesting, estimates and collected data on methane.
That might actually be a question for MDE. As somebody said, I wouldn't use the word monopoly, but the ultimate authority and responsibility resides in the state's Maryland Department of the Environment. And they have to verify that the county is following their directions, and they put out an official estimate of how much methane is generated and how much is consumed, and to make electricity, and how much for heat, and how much is eaten by the microbes in the soil. If this committee is interested, I could we work pretty closely with MDE. I could ask them if there's somebody who could talk with you about how all that works. I only have a vague idea of how there are two kinds. There's a financial audit, of course, but I thought you were referring to like an engineering audit. Whereas okay, once a year, sure, that would be MDE verifies that the techniques they use to look for leaks and that the structural integrity of the collection pipes is all in good shape. They measure the landfill gas fairly frequently. Kevin and his colleagues showed us the little septum. There's a rubber stopper in the pipes where you can stick in a syringe, the same kind you got your COVID vaccination with, and suck out a little bit of air, and then they analyze it. And they have to keep track of it because it's about 50% methane, and if it gets very much air or oxygen in it, it's dangerous. So they audit it fairly carefully, and MDE tells me that that the county is in good standing in terms of the state requirements. That's not to say there isn't room for improvement, but I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I don't think there are any, haven't been any fines levied against Brown Station.
Yeah, no. Brown Station has never been fined or penalized for any violation. We have a clean record in terms of complying with MDE.
Right.
Great.
So that is where the authority resides. Ultimately, is in the state. MDE is in Baltimore. So, and they send people out who actually have methane detectors and verify.
But how does all of this fit with you finding and then the authorities agreeing that there was this whatever tenfold error?
There was vigorous disagreement at first with our findings.
But so it was perfect. The amount being released before was perfect, and now that it's 10 times more, it's still okay.
It's within the letter of the law. That is my understanding. They're not
Even the
violating.
higher amount.
That is correct. Now,
I see.
there's a goal. There's a law that says Maryland will 40 by 30 by the year 2030. We have 40% greenhouse gas reduction, and even more by the year 2050. And so we have to comply with that. But how we achieve that goal doesn't rest entirely on the shoulders of landfills. So, yeah, what MDE has told me is that the operation of the landfill is in accordance with their regulations. But as I said, there's plenty of room for improvement. But I am unaware of any violations of any regulations or laws. In fact, I've been told that MDE says they're going to go after them. They're going to tighten down the amount of methane released. But at the moment, there's no violations of regulations. What they emit is within the allowed limits.
Okay, well, we're at 3 minutes to 7, so I want to respect our time frame. Russ, I'll touch base about further folks who might be able to continue to help the commission understand what's happening at the landfill and talk with Kevin about it, see what makes sense. Okay, so I want to thank Russ for being here with us. Now we have 2 minutes. I'm going to defer the next 2 agenda items to the next meeting. And Kevin, if you have any information, I had inquired with Kevin about the durable medical equipment, and we discussed the possibility of doing a tour. So I don't know if you have dates or how we make these arrangements, but it sounds like a good thing for folks who are interested in that.
So Nancy, the facility is available after April 24th, and we can visit them on weekdays between 10 to 2 p.m., 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So any of the days within the weekdays, they can accommodate us and see how they operate.
Kevin, is that a private operator? That's not a county, is that correct?
Not a
MES.
county. It's run by MES.
It is run by the county.
No, Maryland Environmental Service.
Okay, it is private. Okay.
Mhm.
The Maryland Environmental Service has been in the news a bit lately.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I should say MDE they've told me they have plans to tighten the regulations on how much methane is to be emitted. But the university has nothing to do with regulations. That's strictly MDE that's accountable and has the authority to do that.
But anything you can help Brown Station in figuring out how to reduce the methane is going to help them meet the subsequent tighter regulations.
We would love to. I would like to make Brown Station a role model for landfills the world over. And I think that's doable. We have the resources to make those measurements and implement those corrections. So it may come down to a matter of money. Once we figure out what engineering has to be done, somebody has to pay for it.
Okay.
Figuring it out is the first step.
I have a quick question regarding methane. Do you have any knowledge of consent decree? Is there any consent decree regarding this methane emission with the Brown Station?
I wouldn't know how a consent decree would apply to this landfill. I'm a scientist, not a lawyer. So
Thank you.
Okay, any final thoughts? We're going to wrap up. I'll work with Kevin and Barbara. We'll get something out to folks about maybe some dates for to tour the durable medical equipment facility. Any quick last thoughts on landfill emissions? We'll come back to this topic again. Oh, Barbara, go ahead.
Thanks, Nancy.
Just one quick thing. If we were thinking of asking for the meeting to become 1.5 hours, if we defer that till next month, then it's yet another month before we can do that.
It is, but it's 7 o'clock now, and that's our agreed upon time. I don't know, do folks want to talk, switch topics and discuss that we set a time, 5 minutes? May not be
Yes.
enough. I don't,
I can't do an hour and a half. I can tell you that right now.
okay.
okay, I think I will say good night and go eat my dinner.
Thank you so much for coming, Russ. That was incredibly
Russ.
informative.
Well, I hope we can be
Thank
helpful.
you.
All right,
Thank
well,
you.
let me suggest that for the moment, we can discuss this next time, that we keep the meeting to an hour. And I really ask everyone to please come, be available and ready to roll at 6 o'clock so we can have a full hour. And in that hour, we can discuss, whether we think more time makes sense or not. And Chuck says no. I know Bill's not for it, but we need to hear from everybody. So. Okay, all right, everybody. I think I'm going to just say we're going to close the meeting and thank everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.